Hi, everyone, and welcome to Privacy Beat, where we bring you all of the latest in the world of privacy, everything you need to know, latest hacks, latest regulation, and tips for keeping your digital life safer. So some bad news this week. Sorry, today's going to be one of those doom and gloom shows. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but we had some pretty devastating news come out of the European Commission. They presented a draft of a new law that basically will oblige all providers of email, chat, messenger service to search for suspicious messages in a fully automated way and disclose them to police. This is terrible for all kinds of reasons. Basically, the net result of this is this chat control threatens to destroy all kinds of digital privacy, all kinds of secure encryption. Scanning personal cloud storage would result in the mass surveillance of private photos. Mandatory age verification would end anonymous communication. App store censorship would be the end of secure messaging apps. Like there's a whole lot to unpack here. And just as I introduced this, so renowned cryptography professor Matt Green tweeted out that this document was the most terrifying thing he'd ever seen. He said it's proposing a new mass surveillance system that will read private text messages to detect grooming. And he said it describes the most sophisticated mass surveillance machinery ever deployed outside of China and the USSR, not an exaggeration. So I want to invite onto the show Matt Green. He's a legendary cryptographer. If you guys are watching my Crypto Beat show, you are well aware who Matt Green is, privacy expert. But welcome to the show, Matt. It's so wonderful to chat with you today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's dive into this. And just before we dive into the nitty gritty, I want to remind you guys, we do have a quiz show that we do throughout the show. So if you see questions pop up at the bottom, post your answers. Matt's laughing at us, but this is a way to get you guys thinking and give you guys tips in a fun way to help you protect your privacy. And Matt, maybe you'll be quizzed too. Maybe we'll find out if you got all the right answers, and they'll keep you on your toes. So keep an eye for that and make sure you send your answers there. And we, of course, call this segment Get Off My Digital Lawn. Patrol. All right, let's dive into it. Matt, the first thing I want to talk about here, we got this thing, it's going on and on. We really want you to get off our digital lawn. So basically the crux of this, I mean, it seems that this is going to end end-to-end encryption. It would be completely undermined by what they call client-side scanning on mobile phones and devices. Can you just walk us through what all of this means, like what we should expect from a law proposed such as this?
So we've spoken before about CSAM, which is child sexual abuse media, which is, a real problem on social networks and also on private chat systems of people sending these horrifying pictures of basically child abuse. We used to call it child pornography, but I think that's not doing anyone a service. I think it really is just plain old child sexual abuse. The problem of solving this problem is huge. I mean, the techniques that we have to do it mostly involve looking at what people are sending through social networks and saying, hey, that looks bad. That matches some database of known content, and then maybe flagging them and sending that to the police. What's happening in Europe is something totally different. This is not a system that is going to look at your messages and try to find known child sexual abuse media. It's going to do so much more. It's going to look for child sexual abuse media that has never been seen before. It's going to use machine learning techniques to try to identify whether that photo you're sending is child sexual abuse. So, I hate to be, use a cliche, but that picture you send of your kid to the grandparent, that picture is potentially an AI is going to have to decide if that is CSAM or not. And if it is, you'll get reported onward to some sort of human being who can then do something with it. But that's not even the whole story. It's much worse than that. This new system is actually going to try to read text message content between people and try to figure out if they are grooming. If based on the words being sent in the text messages, what's happening is what they call grooming behavior that will lead to child sexual abuse. And so this is taking us to an entirely new level where we're actually using this technology to sort of stop crime by seeing what words people are saying to each other. And I forget about the technical details. I think that's just enough to kind of summarize why this is so problematic.
It's incredibly problematic, and we'll dive into some of the technical details in a moment. But there was, my gosh, so there was an article that was explaining this, and I'm kind of aghast at the way a lot of media is attacking this issue. Because, of course, everyone wants to stop the exploitation of children, everyone wants to protect children. But the way they framed this, they said the text marks a victory for child advocates, but a setback for privacy activists. And I just wanted to hit my head against a wall when I read that. Like, first of all, well, these children are going to grow up into adults who are going to have all of their privacy removed. So let's remember that. But also, there's this huge problem with mass surveillance. And you talk to experts who are, trying to stop the exploitation of children. They look at these mass surveillance techniques and they say they're not actually helpful at all. And not just like, I mean, this mass surveillance is not only going to not help children, but it's also going to mean a total devastation for our fundamental rights. So can you just talk to us about why these blanket techniques, why they're problematic in the first place?
So I have two kids. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and my 12-year-old is a girl. And I know this is maybe a little bit sexist, but I do worry about her a little more online because she's younger, and because I think there's kind of more creepy people out there. So I can understand why people have these fears. They have fears that children are going to be abused and exploited online. But I have a bigger fear, which is that in the process of trying to help my kids in a way that probably won't help them at all, we're going to end up growing up in a world where we have built systems for surveillance that are more powerful than anything we've ever imagined. Right? My kids are actually reading 1984 in school, and this is such like a cliche now, and I hate to say it, but 1984 was so mild, right? It was just the idea that we're going to have a few cameras pointing around and human beings are going to be able to monitor them. And now we are going from that to a system that can actually in real time monitor every communication that you're having and run it through some algorithm we don't even know how to build that somehow is going to safely determine whether crime is happening and well preserving privacy. And yeah, it's impossible to imagine how that will work in a safe way that doesn't end up being exploited. And I don't want to send my kids off to live in that world. I'm sad that that is a world they might have to live in. With that said, I'm sorry to sort of hog this, but the other thing is this is not voluntary. If I was concerned with my kids, I would not do this, but I could see a world where a parent might install a system to monitor their text communications. I can't see one where a government makes us install it for everyone. I don't know how that works.
It's a terrifying proposition, but that's essentially what they're saying. They're saying that it doesn't matter if you're using these end-to-end encrypted services. We're going to have things on your device that will be scanning everything that you do at all times. It will be reasoning about all of this. We'll be making conclusions. It'll be making mistakes along the way, and we can dive into that in a moment as well. But I wanted to talk about a particular line from the actual report. So it says that this is all to enshrine as rights the protection and care of children's best interests and well-being. And that's the way that they always frame this. I mean, I'm super cynical when I see anything that's pointed towards children. I don't think it's about that at all. But even if it is, even if all they want is just to protect children, that's the entire point of this bill, they never talk about the trade-offs of all of this. Now, in an ideal world, sure, we could keep children safe by mandating that at birth they're all put into a glass box and kept there, to protect themselves from everything. But obviously there are trade-offs. You're not going to put children in a glass box for their whole life to protect them. So the fact that there are trade-offs, we have to start to evaluate, so what are we willing to sacrifice for this protection? And what they're talking about here is literally taking away basic freedoms of everyone, basically the right to any sort of private thought in our digital age. They're willing to take all of that away in the name of protecting freedom. I mean, it's problematic, and it's also problematic that people are so quick to jump on this bandwagon because they don't want to be seen as against children, but they're against privacy right now. They're against fundamental rights of everyone right now because of the means that the government is proposing in order to combat this sexual abuse material. So what are your thoughts of these trade-offs and the best way to talk about this with people so that they understand what's at risk?
First of all, I think it's very obvious that this is the EU Commission, by the way. The European government is not something I understand deeply, but the EU Commission is the executive branch. They come up with proposals and then they hand them to the EU Parliament to vote on. And that may or may not work. So this is not passed yet. It's a proposal. With that said, it's very obvious that the EU Commission sees that they're doing something radical and potentially problematic. They know what they're doing. And the reason they're saying, well, this trade-off is good because it protects fundamental freedoms for children is because they understand. They understand exactly what they're doing, and they have to justify this. That's why so much text in this proposal is basically saying things like, by protecting children, we're actually, making people more free. It's a clear acknowledgement of what they're doing. I want to say that. I also want to say that Europe is one of the continents. The U.S. has been blessed, kind of blessed with the freedom from this, but Europe has actually seen what totalitarian governments can do. Using technology and without the need for technology. They've seen it at least twice. And they understand, I think, in the past, I've been very complimentary of the European government because the EU government has managed to pass a lot of privacy proposals. But this is a 180-degree turn. This is something completely different. That is probably the biggest shift in how governments interact with their people that's ever, occurred outside of, a totalitarian coup. So this is really, really an impressive document for what it is. Anyway, to answer your question, how do you talk to people about this? I think that this is such a difficult thing for me as an American. When I speak to Americans, I think that I get a lot of immediate understanding that we do not want the government reading our text messages. I've been amazed at the response. When Apple tried to do this last year, I felt like Americans really understood the problem here. Europeans also understand privacy, but they have a different relationship with their government than we do, and their government works differently. I am just exploring how you explain to Europeans that maybe this is not a case where you want to agree with your government and give them these powers, because these powers, once given, can't ever be taken back, and they will be expanded to terrorism. They will be expanded to other types of crime and beyond. And there's just the ratchet only goes in one direction. I think it's going to be a really big, long fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny when you talk about, by protecting children, we're making everyone more free. It goes back to what you were saying about 1984. There's so much Orwellian doublespeak. It's like they don't even try to make sense when they're writing this document. They're saying things that just contradict each other. And then they're just expecting people to take it for granted. Like, we are going to take away your freedoms and thereby make you more free. And people are like, oh, great, we're going to become more free. And it drives me crazy that a lot of people aren't really digging into this. I want to talk about an obvious result of something like this. So it says in the report, the European Commission adapted the EU strategy for a more effective fight against child sexual abuse. And let me read that again. So this is what they're calling it: the EU strategy for a more effective fight against child sexual abuse. Now, they could have just as easily called it the EU strategy for more effective fight against dissidents, the EU strategy for more effective fighting against protesters, the EU strategy for more effective fights against anyone who challenges the government or any opposition party or any of that. That's the net result of this. They're setting up a surveillance apparatus that will be monitoring everything, which means that they are putting themselves in a position where they could co-opt total control, and the future generations may never be able to bring that regime down, bring those people in power down. They have everything at their disposal to combat any dissent from what they're doing. Like, it's a terrifying apparatus.
I think the thing to say, that the best way to prevent surveillance abuse is not to build surveillance infrastructure in the first place. That's the only technique we've ever found that stops this problem from continuing into abuse. And the idea that we're going to do all the engineering and all the hard work of building that surveillance apparatus for this specific purpose, which in its simple form seems like a valid purpose, right? Stopping child abuse. But once you build that infrastructure, it's completely repurposable. It's going to look for conversations according to some sort of trained machine learning model. That model can be trained to search for any sort of conversation. And there's just no reason that liberal democracies should be building surveillance infrastructure like this ever. The best way to protect us is not to build it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into the effectiveness of this technology. So the text says that the technologies used must be effective. They must be sufficiently reliable. They must be state of the art in the industry, the least intrusive, so they won't be able to extract any other information from the relevant communications other than the information strictly necessary to detect. They put in a lot of these wonderful miracle phrases like, oh, well, this is what we're going to do. We're just going to have it not be able to be abused. it's impossible to build technology that can't be abused. It's impossible to do the things that they're so wonderfully putting in packaging in these nice terms. You said yourself that no abuse resistant technology can exist, and it's just science fiction. And you also said that monitoring private conversations is intrusive. You said that the way they phrased it is that monitoring these private conversations is intrusive, but it's an acceptable balance because the algorithms don't understand the conversations. So talk to me about why this is so crazy, like ridiculous. It's just a farce at this stage.
First of all, none of this is technology that exists, right? Technology that can look through encryption and run on the client side and look at what you're saying and understand it perfectly and never report a false positive and tell the police and get you potentially arrested based on what you're saying. This does not exist. It does not exist. And when it does exist, we know that it works very badly, right? We have a lot of AI and ML technology that just doesn't do the job perfectly. So that's clear. And you can say that the technology we deploy will be perfect. That doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't mean it'll exist. The really, really critical thing about this is, at the end of the day, we all have this science fiction dream that we're going to be able to outsource all the hard problems in law enforcement to some kind of benevolent AI. That's just a computer system that will never go wrong, will never misreport, will never do anything wrong, and will preserve our privacy by monitoring us all. I mean, this is sort of both a science fiction dream and a nightmare. That may happen, hundreds of years from now, and maybe we'll solve all the hard problems and build a just society around that. The EU is asking us to build it today, and we can't, and it won't exist. It's just a fantasy.
And there's so many issues with bugs and software. Do they really think that this AI is going to be at all accurate? I mean, this is reporting stuff directly to the police. That's their plan, to take these algorithms, scan everything you're doing, make judgments from code built by fallible humans, and give it directly to the police. There's so many things wrong with that pipeline.
We have been trying, we being, technologists have been trying to build predictive policing algorithms that can predict who's going to commit a crime. And we've all seen the results of this. The result is that it basically picks people from minority groups and it identifies them because the bias of the training data gets embedded into the algorithm. And that's just problem one out of 360 different problems you're going to run into when you try to build this magical system.
Yeah. And you've also mentioned that there's this problem of creating technology for a specific purpose, but what we're doing is enabling that technology in general. Once you enable this client-side scanning, once you enable these backdoors on people's devices that can look at everything they're doing, sure, at the outset, they might say, well, we're just doing this for children. And then next week, they'll say, well, we're just doing this for children and for this other really big threat that just came about. And then, the week after, they're saying, we're just doing this for anyone who's a danger to society, who's disrupting the peace and who's doing anything else that we don't like. Like once you enable the fundamental technology, it can be applied to any purpose, and that's really troublesome.
The UK is already proposing something very similar to this, except it will focus on terrorism. So we've already got child safety and we've got terrorism, the same system, just with two different applications. The UK has also said that they're concerned about election disinformation. So think about a system that tries to search for election disinformation in your private text messages to your friends. And this is not me talking about the slippery slope. This is me just identifying the three applications that have been identified as the primary applications of these systems to be built. So here we go.
It's not at all problematic for the government to decide what is election disinformation, especially not for the government in power at any given time to decide in an election what's disinformation. I mean, it's so ridiculous. So the other thing I wanted to cover, it seems to me like basically, in this report, they say certain providers already voluntarily use technologies to detect, report, and remove online child sexual abuse on their services. Yet the measures taken by providers vary widely, and a significant number take no action. So it seems to me that, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding the current situation. It seems that if there's illegal material on a website, websites are already obligated to take it down. But what the EU is now saying is that these websites need to now become police and be the detectives who find this and who need to put backdoors in the more private tech messages to find it. Like it seems like they're outsourcing the police work to the tech industry and saying, you now have to be the ones who find this. Is this correct?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. They're doing the police work that should be done by people who are, trained professionals infiltrating these communities and trying to find the distributors of these algorithms. These media files. They're taking that hard problem and they're saying, it would be easier if we just make a law and we have the tech firms monitor all of their clients and do this search for us. And the problem with that is that the actual criminals, the really, really big offenders, will find ways to get through the drag because they have the financial incentive to do it. They'll get past it. The people who are going to get caught are going to be a whole lot of false positives. They're going to be people who, as horrifying as it is, downloaded this material. And, I'm not saying that's good, but these are not going to be the big fish. It's not going to stop the source of the material. It's just going to make a lot of work for other people, really trash the concept of free communication and speech, and leave us with the same problem at the end.
And it's always going to be easier for law enforcement to add blanket surveillance rather than targeted surveillance. But it doesn't actually make it more effective for them to find the bad people, as you mentioned. Suddenly it's like a needle in a haystack. You have all these false positives, as you mentioned, and it actually makes it harder for them. And the end result is, as you said, the bad guys always find a way. But the good guys have lost all their freedoms in the interim. And, there's almost no chance that they'll get them back. So it's just such a crazy, slippery slope there.
It's retail surveillance. It's taking the people who are using the easy to use channels like Telegram and WhatsApp and so on. Those are the people that are going to be surveilled. The people who use custom encryption software and make a lot of money selling things on dark markets, and they're the actual source of this all. They will be essentially insulated from all of these laws. That's what makes it so crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also want to talk. You had this tweet, and it kind of broke my heart because it resonates a lot with me. You said, "I'm so tired. It seems like every time people rally to fight off one bad surveillance proposal, an even more powerful organization pops up to devise a more invasive one. Is there no constituency out there for just let me be? Don't spy on my private communications?" I feel like the exact same thing, and I feel like I'm kind of a Cassandra who every other week I'm like, guys, this is the worst law to be proposed yet. And everyone's like, oh my God. It gets to a certain point where you've listed 12 different laws that we've successfully fought that's been trying to ban end-to-end encryption or put backdoors on people's devices. And by the 12th one, it's almost like it's deliberate desensitization. And that's my conspiracy hat that's on, but it seems to be backed up with historical precedent that a lot of these people, the politicians will start off putting forward a law that they think will not get passed. No way, but they just, testing the waters. And then they put out another one that they know won't get passed, but it starts more conversation about this. By the 12th proposal that says the same thing, people have heard this so much that they're no longer shocked by it, and they're no longer willing to put up another fight against the 12th thing that's been put out. And so it seems like a mechanism for basically steamrolling people, eventually getting their way with these terrible policies. I feel so cynical, and I'm so sorry to all my viewers who are like, there's no hope, but it gets really depressing. So your tweet kind of really struck me.
I want to say one thing about that. So last August, Apple proposed this CSAM-scanning proposal. It was going to be built into iPhones, and they were going to launch it 5 weeks from the day it was proposed. When I saw this proposal came out, I tweeted about it, and I was really depressed. I really thought, I've been working on cryptography my whole career, and because of this one company doing a thing unilaterally, all of that work is now in the trash. There's no hope for private communications. I was really down for a week. I was really depressed. I'm sorry to tell you about this, but I was really depressed. And then this amazing thing happened, which is that Apple's proposal ran into a wall of opposition from real people, mostly tech people, but also people who weren't tech people. I, talked to you, I think, when this happened. I ended up on talking to people on the radio. I was talking to DJs for talk radio. And the first question they asked me was, how do we turn this system off? And that was just, suddenly I felt like maybe there was hope. Maybe people really do care about this. I think people really do care about this issue if it's brought to them. The problem is, you're absolutely right. Like, we can win here and there when people actually see this, but there are just going to be continued attempts to make these things happen in weird forums like the EU Commission, where people won't pay attention, and all they have to do is win once. And it's very hard to build this constituency of real people who are paying attention and care about tech issues enough to make sure those people are scared. I think it can happen, but I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, and it makes me feel like perhaps the political route just isn't the most successful route, because eventually they're going to get just enough to tip that over the edge, and we'll just have just not enough people who are still galvanized. It's interesting you talk about the Apple thing, and I think you still have in your Twitter bio, one of the screeching voices of the minority. Like, what came out of the Apple thing is they had this internal memo, I think it was, where they were like, guys, you're hearing a bunch of dissent about what we're planning to do, but we're doing a good thing. And what you're hearing is just, the screeching voice is the minority. And then all these people became galvanized like yourself and were just like, no, we are not the screeching voices of the minority. We are people who are privacy preserving and privacy conscious and practical about where this is going to end. So I really like that you've still got that there as just a reminder, that there are people out there who still believe in fighting this stuff.
Yeah, until we win, and I don't even know if it's possible to win, we have to keep fighting. That's all we can do. I hope that there's a
Yeah.
generation of younger people coming up behind me who can carry on the fight, because I'm starting to feel old. But other than that, let's try.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Only so many times where I could be like, "This is the end of everything." So, okay, let's end on a more positive note, because there are absolutely things that people can do to protect their privacy. Like, I wonder what the next step is. Like, if politicians are always going to be moving in one direction, and that direction is to try to accumulate more power, try to break end-to-end encryption, try to see more of our data, then it's on the individual to make sure that they are doing their utmost to use tools that protect that. So, like, what is your vision for the future? Like, what's the end game here? Like, even if the EU mandates that we have to have these devices that are able to do client-side scanning, are we just going to end up with a more fractured tech industry with smaller products that are releasing phones that don't have this client-side scanning? Are people just going to be using these fringe encryption tools, even if the governments come out and try to ban them? Like, you'll just, like, in the end, you can't ban decentralized movements. You can't target every single one of the billion people, however many, 7 billion, 8 billion these days people in the world. You can't target all of them. That's why they go after the intermediaries, the companies, the hardware developers, the software developers. But if we have a more fractured and decentralized movement where we're using all these things and it's incumbent upon them to target everyone individually, I don't see how they can win.
I think that they can't win. I think they can't win against people who actually have the ability to install the software they want, do the things they want. What they're hoping is that they can get everybody else, right? There are a billion people using WhatsApp, and their bet is that maybe 10 million of those people will install encryption software, but the other 990 million people are just using WhatsApp and it happens to have encryption. I think they're wrong. I think that the rise of Signal has shown that people really, really do care about privacy and will go out of their way to install new apps that have privacy. I think the interesting thing, I just want to say one thing, the EU is also asking for chat federation, which is they want these encrypted or non-encrypted messenger apps to be able to be federated so anyone could write their own app. It's really interesting because the minute you combine chat federation laws with encrypted messaging apps, now you can have 100 people using different WhatsApp apps, but all connecting to WhatsApp, and some of those can actually do encryption. And I think that is a future for encryption where governments have actually kind of painted themselves into a corner. So there is a future. There's a technical future. There's a privacy culture future, and I think there's a lot of openness in the world for this. And so it is actually an exciting time. If you're coming into this space and you're thinking, what can I do for privacy? There are 10 million things you can do, and I hope you're doing it.
Yeah, there's so many things. You could be choosing better browsers, you could be choosing better services, you could be swapping out your email provider, doing one that doesn't have access to everything you've ever written, better messaging services. Just start to take your own data back from these companies, and that's the best way you can empower yourselves. Like, it's interesting, we could do a whole episode on this federated chat system that they're proposing, because most people have been painting it as this is terrible for end-to-end encryption, because this will lower everything to the lowest common denominator. It'll break different encryption standards, but it may possibly give more people encryption. Is that the point that you were making, that it may actually improve the privacy of some people?
I do. I do actually think if the only thing that's a barrier to deploying more encryption is a technical problem of how do we do federated chat, we're good at solving technical problems. We'll solve those problems. It's an irritation that we will quickly get past. And, I think that the ability to actually get software into people's hands, that's the challenging part, right? If WhatsApp is the only way to access the WhatsApp network and they can prevent WhatsApp from having pure encryption, then that's a problem. But if we can have our own software, I think there is a future.
Absolutely. So let's wind that up there. I will remind everyone that we do our best here to teach you products that will give you back some form of privacy in your digital lives. So make sure that you're checking out all of those, and let us know if there's a subject that you're interested in that you think is like leaking privacy that you think that we should cover. We would love to do a deep dive and just give you the information that you need. This is a non-profit channel. We're actually funded by 501c3, so we're not sponsored by these products. We're not, giving you access to all of these deals or whatever. We're just here to give you the information because we want to protect your privacy. So let us know how we can help you better. But on that note, Matt, I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us. You're always such a wealth of information, and it's just so wonderful to have you here sharing your insight with everyone. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap that section up. Before we go, we obviously have our quiz winner, which we have to announce. Let's go over those quiz questions quickly and make sure you guys all got the right answers. So first one, what is a SIM swap attack? It is obviously a way for hackers to take control of your phone number and associated accounts. You shouldn't be using SMS two-factor for anything because your SIM can easily get swapped out. Be careful of that. What is E2EE messaging platform? Well, it stands for end-to-end encryption, and it's a platform where no one but the sender and recipient of the message can read it. I'm sure the EU would like to redefine it as a platform where no one but you and the government can access your messages. That's not actually end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption is where it's private just between the sender and recipient. Final one, what is the iCloud Private Relay? It is a tool-like system that makes browsing with Safari browser more private, but we actually have a video coming out on Saturday that dives into why it may or may not actually be the right choice for you from a privacy standpoint. So stay tuned for that one. And Sam, my producer, come on over and announce the winner for today.
Thank you, Naomi. Our winner today, Speed Racer 111. You have achieved eternal Privacy Beat glory. And some quick fun facts about Speed Racer 111. Being an adrenaline junkie. He loves being an adrenaline junkie. Loves the smell of rubber on pavement. Loves the government sliding out of his DMs. Congratulations.
Don't we all? Absolutely. You win Eternal Crypto Beat, Privacy Beat Glory, which is the highest honor in the whole of our channel. So congratulations. You can take that with you throughout your life as you take your privacy techniques. Go forth, go implement more privacy, go spread the word about why privacy is important, and go have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button before you go. We'll catch you later.